You're listening to the Gate of Trust podcast. Join hosts Matt Trush and Felix Friedberg's heart-to-heart conversations with artists, entrepreneurs, scholars, and laymen who, by strengthening their trust in God despite all odds, experience outright miracles. Trusting in God can literally save lives. And now, Gate of Trust podcast hosts Matt and Felix.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Felix.
And this is the Gate of Trust podcast.
Hey, Matt. I'm trying out a new prayer. Maybe you should try it too.
That's great, Felix. Let me hear it.
All right, here it goes. Dear God, so far today, I haven't gossiped, haven't lost my temper, haven't been greedy, grumpy, nasty, selfish, or even self-indulgent. Thank you, dear God, for lending me the strength to do that. But in a few minutes, dear God, I'm going to need a lot more help because I'm getting out of bed.
Nice prayer, Felix. Yeah, I should probably say that one along with my morning coffee.
Matt, our guest today, Devorie Kreiman, has been through a lot. She lost 4 of her babies and raised 4 healthy children. Then tragedy struck again. Her only son, Yossi, weeks before his wedding, died in a diving accident. She's had to learn to live with loss again and again, and yet Devorie's found the strength through Bitachon to overcome and to rebuild a life of joy.
Devorie is really an inspiration and a living example of how to apply Bitachon, trust, in our lives. May her story be an inspiration to all of us as we seek a life of meaning and joy during these challenging 3 weeks.
Without further ado, the resilient Devorie Kreiman.
Devorie Kreiman, welcome to the Gate of Trust podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Devorie, let me brag about you a bit. Devorie Kreiman has a master's in education and served as the principal of Beis Rebbe Junior High School in Los Angeles for 12 years. Devorie is an educational consultant, leader of teacher training workshops in Los Angeles and New York, and the author of the acclaimed Bas Mitzvah Notebook. Coming soon, Devorie is soon launching her new book entitled Even If I'm Not, a memoir dedicated to her son Yossi. Devorie's personal journey through challenge and loss has led her to develop a user-friendly understanding of the Torah approach to human resilience and growth. She's an inspirational lecturer on the power of faith, humor, and joy. And now, Bitachon, trust. Devorie Kreiman, welcome again to the Gate of Trust podcast.
Thank you.
Devorie, I believe you have an inspiring and heart-wrenching story that I feel is vital for our podcast listeners to hear. So I thank you for taking the time to join us today and for sharing some personal events that have led you to incorporate Bitachon, trust, in your life.
Okay. The story has been told many times, so I imagine it's been heard already. But my husband and I, the rabbi thing with we're going to have lots of children. We had 3 children in 3 years. And I was pregnant with my 4th when my oldest was 4. And he was born. He was a perfectly normal baby as far as how he looked, beautiful, even had a head of hair. Don't know why that matters, but it matters. And he was very weak. He seemed to just not have a whole lot of energy. And as the time went on, the doctors were checking him, and they kept finding other things that were wrong, but they didn't know what. It was a real mystery what was wrong with this child. But he just was too weak in the beginning to cry properly and eventually to breathe. And he got sicker and sicker. And we went into the Lubavitcher Rebbe actually for a bracha. My husband went. He went just for the one day. He went to the Rebbe, and the doctors had said that there was a small chance that that the child could die, but they weren't sure. And we hadn't named him because he was a boy. We were waiting for the circumcision, for the bris. And the Rebbe gave us a bracha for a healthy child in the set time and in the right time. And when my husband kept asking for a blessing for this child, we couldn't get it. So he came home, and I knew the baby was going to die. And the baby died, and the doctor said, it was a failure to thrive. It happens. It's a fluke. You can have healthy children, just move on. And I wrote this long letter, which actually ended up being published as an article, explaining to the doctors about soul purpose and that we had named the baby Nisanel, which means God has given, and that we believe that this baby needed just this journey and this short parenting. It was a few months, and that was that. But then we had another child, and again, the child was sick. And that's when we realized that we're dealing with something much bigger. And by that point, we made a lot more progress. And we understood that what we were dealing with is that our babies were missing the enzyme that produces energy in the body. And I always say, how people say, I don't have any energy. I know what it really looks like when someone doesn't have energy. I mean, they looked perfectly normal because till birth, they were going on my energy. And then you'd have these adorable, beautiful babies that just couldn't manufacture energy. And I couldn't understand. The blessing of the Rebbe was in the set time and in the right time. And long story, but we had another child. It's actually her birthday's tonight. She's going to be 27. We named her Bracha. And that's our healthy child. But longer story, over 10 years, there were 4 of these very sick children. And then something that I'm only now that I'm older starting to really talk about was the understanding as, a religious family that there were not going to be any more children. And that was the grief that I couldn't speak about, which is why many times when I talk to people, I look for that grief. It's not just the big drama of 4 very sick children and a lot of research and trying to work with the Mitochondrial Foundation and try to solve this, but the understanding that we had 4 healthy children, but we were not going to have more children. I was very, very young. I was in my early 30s. So that was something that I really had to work with, that feeling of wholeness and, knowing that I just could not have the family that I thought I just, had to have. I'd always wanted. And in my mind, I always separated it. There were the 4 sick children. There were the 4 healthy children. And we had a son, Yossi, and 3 daughters. And they grew up as kids do. Stuff happened. But my son, my Yossi, was like one of those kids. He was just, he was very, very nerdy, and he was fascinated by things. Just last night, I actually spoke to the Shliach of Berlin because Yossi spent a year in Berlin. He was learning there. And we were talking about, I met him and we were talking about stories about Yossi, and he was just telling me some funny stories. One of the things that Yossi liked to do was he liked to pretend that he could speak foreign languages. So when he spent the year in Berlin, he came home and he was making this long speech in German, and it sounded so real with the whole accent. All he was doing was naming all the streets in the neighborhood, but like with emphasis as if he's telling a story. He was funny, and he was very, very interested in nature, but he was really not a wild kid, but he was the kind of kid that learned all day, and he was like really in a book all day. And he was hired to be a learning director in Costa Rica. And as a learning director, he got to go on the trips. And one of the trips was scuba diving, and he just fell in love, not even with the adventure of it. He was actually even kind of like a hesitant kind of a kid. He wasn't wild. That's the irony of all this. So, as much as you could say irony when you're speaking about, Bitachon and Hashem running the world. But yes, he went scuba diving, fell in love with what he saw, and wanted to continue going. And meanwhile, he came home. He became a chassan. He got engaged. And 6 weeks to his wedding, he went scuba diving. He wasn't careful with the equipment, and he had too much weight. He died. And I remember that when we got the call, my husband came to get me, and we were going to the hospital. And my husband already knew, but I wasn't hearing it. So I was just saying the whole time that, my husband is an Atzala. My husband is very amazing. He's an EMT. We'll go there and we'll make it right. And the whole way to the hospital, I'm holding my Tehillim, but I couldn't open it. And I keep saying to myself again and again and again, the same thing. This is not the babies. This is Yossi. Because it was very clear in my head that I have 2 kinds of kids. I have the babies and they're sick and they died. And I have the 4 healthy kids. I'm the woman who lost 4 children. That's a lot of drama. Yossi is one of the healthy kids. Yossi's getting married, and it was so clear in my head. And then when we got there, the doctors asked us to come in the room, and that was that. But that was really where I had to fight again. Sometimes something happens and we say, okay, this is what Hashem did. I lost the 4 babies. There was a lot of drama to that. And I worked very, very hard on it. And we were the family that, it's a funny way to say it, but kind of almost like the success of it, that we moved forward. My children didn't have a childhood shadowed by illness and death. There were sick children and the babies died, but my children, even now, they talk about it a lot. They had a happy, vibrant home. I went back to school and I became very involved in education, and we were not about that. Even though it was a strong part of our lives, we really lived like with joy and with closeness. And it was just a very big piece, but we weren't about sadness and grief. But when Yossi died, I felt like this tremendous, not only shock, but rage. I couldn't believe it had happened to me. Like we had already done ours. And I had to really find my way back, not to anything new, but to everything I'd always said was true. Like we talk about Hashem and we talk about realness, emes, truth. The day that Yossi died, it was the 28th of Cheshvan. So as a principal, I would always say the Hayom Yom every day, like this little Hasidic saying. And that morning, I spoke about divine providence, that not even a leaf from a tree will move, or a blade of grass, actually, if it's not meant to be. Every movement in the world is orchestrated. And how much more so, the Rebbe says, if a leaf of grass doesn't move, if a blade of grass doesn't move without, God making it because there's a purpose for it, how much more so the movement of a human being. And I say, had you stopped me that day and said, what you said now, is that true? I would have said, of course, yes, divine providence, every movement. And a couple of hours later, it was like every movement. Yossi died, quote, by accident. But I had just taught that there's no accident. So I had to come back to that and find that. And Yossi was a very happy child. So when you talk about bitachon, about trust, I think of it as simcha, because they really go together. Bitachon is really simcha, because if you have it right, it's certainty, then it's joy. And I had to fight very hard to work my way towards it. I still do. There's no grand arrival. So during that first year, had you asked me then, I would have said I did nothing. But I found out later that I actually wrote a book because I was journaling, and it turned into that because we never know what's coming. So during that time, really the struggle was not to find a belief system that would teach me something new, but to come back to what I had always had and make it very, very real. And that really is Bitachon and Simcha, that Hashem is good, that there are no mistakes, that we're going to be okay. And I came to it kicking and screaming, but, there's no choice. So that's basically the story.
Devorie, that's an incredible story. As you're going through that, aside from journaling, what other things were you able to do to put your mind at ease, or what practices did you bring in or focus on to channel your grief at that time?
So in all honesty, the first year, almost nothing. I would open a siddur and try to daven, and I couldn't. And the truth is, it wasn't because I didn't believe. It was because there was too much meaning coming at me. Like I would say a Lakai Neshama, and I would think about how the soul comes down in this world, and we talk about it. Like, you gave it to me, and I'm going to give it back. And it was too close to home. Or I would say Az Yashir. I remember once I went to New York, and I was in 770, and I was trying to pray. I was trying to daven, and Az Yashir is the whole story of the Egyptians drowning. And you're not allowed to stop in the middle there. You're not allowed to talk there. But I just shut it and I walked away. So there was a lot of messy anger and real struggle just even to continue, to want to continue. My husband is, he's witty, he's smart, and he got right up and did what he had to do. I was the one that had the luxury of tantruming. That's really the truth. And I was cooking for Shabbos in that first year, and I'm making eggplant, and I was salting it. So my husband comes into the kitchen, and I really don't like when my husband's in the kitchen, but my husband comes into the kitchen and he says, "Why are you putting so much salt?" So I said, "This is how my mother does it." And he says, "Yeah, but why so much salt?" So I said, "Because when you salt the eggplant, it takes away the bitterness." And all of a sudden, I feel like there's something coming down over my head and my shoulders, like white flakes. And I turn around and my husband is shaking the salt shaker over my shoulders to take away the bitterness.
Wow.
So there was there was no quick. I'll tell you what I did do. I went to Israel and I met with Sherry Mindell. I write about it in the book. That was actually the beginning of a little bit of a turnaround. And I met with the Haymans who had lost their only child. And I felt like if they can continue, then I can find the strength. So I did talk to them. I didn't let a whole lot of other people near me. I was very, very sensitive to any superficial kind of message. I needed real. Israel has real. They know how to do broken over there. So Sherry Mandel, who runs the Kopi Mandel Foundation, she lost her son. Her son was actually the same age as Yossi. They were born the same summer. Yeah, but he died 10 years earlier. She started a foundation and she had some very creative therapies. So I went there. I went a couple of times. So I was looking for just somebody to hold on to. It was more like a desperate grabbing for whatever I could find. So that was a very big help. Other than that, I think I tried inch by inch. Baruch Hashem, I had my daughter, my miracle, this Brachalea that was born when the babies were sick because my other kids were already grown and out of the house. And she kind of forced us. In a way, it was a miracle all over again. Did I mention tonight is her birthday?
Yeah. Beautiful.
So she actually forced us back. Also, she was a teenager and had been very close to Yossi. So I had an obligation to her. I started to worry about her. So that forced me to at least function to the extent that I could. My husband. But what I learned and what I tell people all the time is we don't always need to have something outside of us to force us. It took me a while to recognize that I myself, I felt so wretched and raw and broken. I myself am worth making it, whatever making it looks like. And I couldn't figure out what making it looks like.
But it sounds like between your husband and Mrs. Mandel and your daughter, the people around you, and even beyond the people that were close to you, you sought people that you felt would be able to give you solace, that they would really understand deeply how you felt because of how deep your pain was. You had to find people on similar ground. And
then eventually learning. Like you're talking about the book, The Gate of Trust, Shara Bitachon. So I want to tell you how I came into that because it came also through a place of pain. I write for Ami magazine and I was interviewing Rabbi Yanki Reitchik. I wrote about him as a prison chaplain. And he was telling me about, his work and he deals with the Jewish prisoners. And he mentioned to me that there's this book. This was during COVID. It had just come out. I think the new white book that everybody, the famous white book. And he said to me that through the Aleph Institute, they were giving, I think it was a soft cover because it was prison. They were giving a book to every single Jewish prisoner in the United States. And that touched me very much. And I kind of filed it away. And I thought, if you're looking for a place where there's such hopelessness and despair or such a Hopefully there isn't because they're working with them, but there's where would there be the greatest likelihood of people wanting to give up? It's where they're locked up and they can't do much. And there they give them this book. And I could just imagine the hope. I was like wishing it for them that they read this book and they have something huge to grab onto. And then Rabbi Yankee Reichik's brother, Rabbi Shimon Reichik, is a Rav of our shul. And we've been very, very close for many years. I mean, he knew Yossi from the time Yossi was a toddler, and he was ill. And I got very, very scared. I mean, this is a very, very special, close rabbi who was also a good friend, a very, very caring man. So I was talking to another member of the community and we said, what could we do? What could we do? So we reached for this book and we decided in honor of Rabbi Reichik, we're going to learn this book. Rabbi Reichik passed away and we're still, we're grieving for him very much. I think the LA community is really bereft, but we got the book and we're learning it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Devorie, thank you for sharing these stories with us. I've heard people refer to Bitachon trust as a muscle. Some people feel they need to exercise it in order for it to sink in. Other people say it's something you need to work on, like working out, right? And the Rebbe said that we need to read the Gate of Trust book a few times in order to internalize trust. From your experience, it sounds like Bitachon trust is more than all this. Bitachon could be something that can literally help you survive. So how did this book, or internalizing the concepts of Bitachon trust, help you get through it all?
I'm going to give you one word: bigger. And every time that I face a situation, and it's funny because people think that when you have like really big stories, like, I lost most of my kids, that's a dramatic statement, then the little things just don't touch you. But there's always stuff. Bigger. That there's always, that it's bigger than what we can see. To me, that's what it is. Even though I know that the way that the concept of Bitachon really is not that Hashem, that God can do it, but that God will. And therefore we're happy. It's certainty. But to me, before I get to that, it's the concept of bigger, which is that we're seeing what we're seeing in front of us, but we're only seeing a small part. It's so much bigger. Like we're living our time in this world, but we're really souls on a journey and there's a purpose, and every big and little thing that happens to us is part of a bigger picture. And anytime we go there, it's just a matter of perspective. And when you're asking about what helped me after Yossi, it was that sense of a bigger picture of my soul and my husband's soul having to come down here and kind of escort the souls of my 5 children who died, my 4 babies and my Yossi, much, much, much bigger than the here and the now. So anytime I'm struggling with something, I remind myself of that, bigger, because it's really a big fight. I mean, Bitachon, Simcha, to me, the place that I find it, I started to look at what the words of the davening mean. When I pray, I look at the words, and the words are so incredible. Like if you really look at what you're saying, that we say over and over again, they're together in Havdalah, they're together in davening, they're together everywhere. The same 3. It says like God is our stronghold, right? Hashem Tzvakos, and fortunate is the one who trusts in God, and God is our salvation, and He's answering us on the day that we call. And it sounds very easy. Every single day when I wake up, every single day, the first thought that goes through my head is why today I don't have time to pray. It's too long or I'm too busy. And then I have to say, no, we're going to do it. So it's a constant work. And how do I push myself through? I say bigger. My little details of what I think are so important, I'm really here for a bigger reason. Of course I have to pray. I'm here for something bigger. Anytime I'm facing a disappointment or hopefully not any more loss, but anything that doesn't go the way I want, and it just seems so obvious. This is a situation. This is what I have to do. How am I going to manage? This is how much time I have. All the limitations of this world. I say bigger. There's more. This is soul work. I need to learn patience or faith or whatever it is, that connection, empathy, whatever this situation is forcing me into. So for me, I always jump back to that. We don't know more than what's right in front of us, but we do believe. All of us, we're here in this world for a short time. There's a lot that has to be done, but it's part of a much grander scheme. It's bigger. So at this moment, when I'm frustrated because something didn't work out, or I wasted a few hours on something, and whatever it is, something didn't happen, or the very big losses, I ask myself, what's the bigger? And the bigger is, how can I lean into a trust in God, or how can I lean into something in my own character that needs to be fixed now? And when you do that, there's a lot of joy. I'm going to tell you a story. I travel around, I do talks. So one of my talks, I can't remember exactly where it was. I know it was somewhere I know I flew into JFK, that I remember. And I'm driving out in the middle of nowhere. I think it was somewhere in Pennsylvania, but I'm not sure. I remember that I was driving through New Jersey. So I just landed and I have a talk in this very fancy country club. It's an evening talk, and I had landed sometime middle of the day. So I rented a car and I'm driving and I'm looking at gorgeous scenery and we're going into like very woodsy areas. And I'm going to speak that night. It's what I do. And then I start to see signs and it's just letting you know that there's a bridge ahead and there's a toll. Okay, all good. As I get closer, it starts to say things like toll, exact change. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't know. I don't have my regular stuff with me. I just got off a plane, but I'll manage. I'll get by. We'll figure it out one way. I get a little closer, it's cash only, exact change. And I'm thinking, okay, I'll figure it out. There's no stores here. I probably have some money. I have $1. I have a credit card. I'll get by. And I get closer and the woods kind of like there's like a stone wall almost. And this is already about 5:00. So there's a bunch of cars, even though it's a very woodsy area. And it's a 1-lane toll. And then it says toll 50 cents. And I'm starting to get nervous. I don't know if I have 50 cents and I can't really check. I'm driving and I don't really have my regular, I don't have any cash. I don't have much with me. I have just some dollar bills. I wasn't sure what I had. And I pull up and as I get closer, I realize there's nobody in the toll booth. It's just like a bowl. And I guess it works by weights because you need exact change. You have to throw 2 quarters. So I pull up, I'm first in line, and I start going through all my bags. I have dollar bills, credit card, nothing's helping me. I have a quarter and 2 dimes. I have 45 cents. So the first thing that goes into my head, of course, is, oh no, oh no, oh no. And then I say to myself 2 things because I'm an old hand at this, a little practice here. I say, first of all, I am not going to spend the night here. I don't have 50 cents. I don't know how, but I'm not going to spend the whole night sitting in front of this, little bridge with all these cars honking behind me. And the second thing that went through my head is one day this is going to be funny. So if it's going to be funny later, it's going to be funny now. And as soon as I calmed down, I came up with a very practical answer. Get out of the car and go speak to somebody in the other cars and, see who has 50 cents. So I'm opening my car door, but I guess it had taken me too long because at that point, there's a woman from a few cars back and she's stomping forward and she's huff and puff, all this indignant, like, who's this idiot who doesn't have the 50 cents? And she throws 50 cents into the bowl. And I'm like, thank you. Wait, I have $1. I have 45 cents. And she's so mad. And she just, and I go through the toll and that's that. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, look at me. I knew the difference between a big thing and a small thing. I didn't get crazy. I actually was able to laugh. Look at me. I've made some progress. Then I drive a few more miles and I think that's not the point. Big and small is the same. Everything that we encounter, a tremendous loss that's so big that it's hard even for me to describe what that was like, or missing 5 cents and not knowing the 50-cent toll. They're all orchestrated by God. There are no mistakes or random stuff. And all of it is material to work with. And all of it is bigger. All of it is a job. And when you look at it that way, what am I meant to do in this moment? Otherwise, we get very scared. I mean, these days especially. Right. People are terrified, the economy and the gas and the this and the that. And what are we going to do? And we can very, very easily just run away in fear. Well, there's nowhere to run. Believe me.
Right. Right. That's a very good explanation in terms of, the muscle. It sounds like it's somewhere between a boxing match and a dance, right? In terms of the kind of exercise you're getting, you're going back and forth. So, we're talking about, Bitachon, has been said like it can save lives. Obviously it helps us deal with these challenges, big and small, as you describe, as they play out in our lives, good times. Is the purpose of Bitachon there to help us get by? Is it there to help us persevere, to live on? I guess in your opinion, it sounds like maybe your thoughts are it's maybe a formula for living a joyful, richer Jewish life compared to Simcha. What is your take on that?
I think it's the whole of it. I don't think it's extra to anything. I think that what is Bitachon really? Bitachon is there's a God and God gives us everything. Everything comes from God. There's no mistakes, right? There's no random anything. Because a person might say, well, what if I don't deserve it, right? So then whatever God does, I believe it comes from God, but maybe I don't like what comes from God. So Bitachon is really pushing it one step further. And it's saying, if you do the work, you throw all the logic out the window and you say, maybe I don't deserve, but God not can, but will. We know God can. God will make this good. And we don't allow in the negativity. That's tremendous work. It's very, very hard. I named my book, Even If I'm Not. And I want to tell you why. When my son, my Yossi, was maybe, I think, 6 or 7, a little kid, it was one morning and he was downstairs in the kitchen. I was rushing. All the kids were still little and we were getting ready to go out in the morning. And I kind of like shouted off my shoulder to him, Yossi, there's bagels on the counter if you're hungry. And he said, even if I'm not. Because he was that kind of a kid. He was very he loved witty stuff. And I said, what do you mean? Just the bagels on the counter if you're hungry. He said, you said the bagels are on the counter if I'm hungry. The bagels are on the counter even if I'm not hungry. They're there anyway. And that kind of became a line in our house, even if I'm not, I would pick it up like you go to shopping and the salesperson says, hi, my name is Anna if you need anything. And I think, no, your name is not Anna if I need anything. Your name is Anna anyway, even if I'm not. And I remember after Yossi died, because that was just his way. After Yossi died, I remember thinking like all this knowledge and all this comfort and all this strength, it's always there. The question is, am I going to reach for it? It's ready. It's waiting. It's there, even if I'm not. Meaning, Bitachon is not something extra. Oh, okay, I'm doing this, and I also believe in Hashem. I'm gonna pray. What is Bitachon? It's really this sense of surety, and it's very hard to do because, again, bigger. We see what's in front of us, and people say, "Well, that's impossible. This is a situation. This is a political or economic or medical situation." And I believe in God. People say, what do you want from me? I do. I believe in God, but I'm still afraid. Or I'm still working too many hours. I don't have time now for praying or for learning because I got to control this. And Bitachon says, 1 minute. You can change the outcome, but the work that you're doing is actually a emotional, mental, and spiritual work. You're saying, I am making it good. And it's very, very hard to do because you're actually saying, with my belief, I'm changing the reality. And I want to tell you an unfinished story. I have somebody who's very, very close to me who has a child who is in a serious medical situation. It's not life-threatening. Amen. Thank you. It's not life-threatening. It's life-altering, meaning he will live, but his life will be very, very severely restricted if they don't find something. And it's serious. And they're going from medical center to medical center. She reached out to me. And I was petrified. I thought, what if I teach her about Bitachon? What if it doesn't work? And then I realized, me either, I haven't even started. If the whole point of Bitachon is that you don't do that. But I was honest with her and I said, listen, I'm going to tell you something, even though I'm scared, because she's not Chabad. And this is a very integral Chabad teaching. And I said, I want you to learn something with me. And we learned the original talk of the Rebbe, which is on Moses, on Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was afraid and he was worried, what if they don't deserve? And that actually led to the situation not being good. And this is Moshe Rabbeinu. This is Moses. This is the greatest, leader of history. And I said, but this is the work. And you have to be so positive that you're actually creating a vessel. And then I said to her, do something physical, even as if, but you have to actually believe it, because that's what God says. You threw out all logic and everything that makes sense and everything that's in front of you. You went for bigger when you couldn't see it. It's very easy to go for bigger when you can see evidence. When it makes no sense, you reached for something you couldn't see. I will reward you with something that makes no sense, whether you deserve it or not. So I pushing her and encouraging her. And I told her, prepare for a Suda Sada, a meal of thank you. Even though right now there is not even really I don't want to say there's not hope, because with Jews there's always hope, but there's not any natural way that they're finding a way that this child's life will, hopefully, things will turn around.
Amen.
And she, amen, thank you. And she went and she bought I told her, make a menu, buy what you need. She bought the paper goods. And when I went to her house, I saw she not only bought the paper goods, she took off all the wrappers. And they're going for consultations. We have to do what we have to do. It's an unfinished story, but Bitachon is where you don't even allow. And I'm struggling with that, because part of me is like, yeah, the Rebbe says, and we're going to think only good. And then there's a part of me, and what if that doesn't work? And then she's going to say it didn't work and I made her crazy. And then I have to fight that. That's the work. Bitachon is a certainty. Even the gate of trust, just the introduction. My friend and I spent a very long time just on the introduction, because that's really what he talks about a lot, that you lean into it with a surety. You're sure, you're certain, you're absolutely happy. Bitachon and joy and serving Hashem. It's one. It's not separate. If you have bitachon, you have joy. It will be good. You have nothing to worry about. It's just a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. You're making me think about Nachshon. Yeah. All of the Jews were trying to figure out what to do. Everybody had a different idea of things to do, and he just went in up to his face. So sometimes we're in it no matter what. So why not just go ahead and have faith? Because there's all kinds of options. But like you say, if we create the vessel and we go in with both feet, with both feet first and with our heart, we'll see success.
I can't say that I'm there. I could tell you this: I'm in the game. Meaning, I can't say that I walk around calm and joyous, during COVID when everybody was hoarding. I was like, okay, what can we do? Grab whatever we need. Are we going to be okay? Are we going to starve to death? Or,
Right.
We live without toilet paper? The difference is now between me now and me before I started to work on this was that as now I know what I'm fighting for. Meaning I can't say that I walk around all day calm and happy with certainty, but every time a flash of fear comes up, it's fear or it's sadness or bitterness. There's so many ways that we can, have our dissatisfaction. I always tell myself bigger picture. Hashem can, Hashem will. And I fight for it. It's a losing battle sometimes, but I'm in the battle. I haven't given up.
It's like the guy who comes to fix things in your house, and he comes with a tool belt, and it has a screwdriver and a hammer. It has all kinds of different tools. He doesn't know which tool he's going to need, but between the Torah and the Bitachon and your friends, you have a tool. You have some kind of tool. Doesn't mean there's not something broken. It doesn't mean that something doesn't need to be fixed. It just means you have to take an action and reach for something and apply it and be in the game, like you said, in the game.
Devorie, I think you also did something very unique and marvelous, which was that when we learn about Bitachon, usually we're talking about achieving a serenity and a freedom from worry, right? It's sort of the negation of a feeling of anxiety. But really, you're bringing Bitachon to a new level, which is it's through having Bitachon, we not only have an anxiety-free life, we have a life full of joy and simcha and purpose and bigger than. All of those things are really the springboard to greater optimism and trust that things are going to get better and things are in fact good, and it can only be good because that's what Hashem wants for all of us.
Yeah. But what is simcha really? If you look at simcha, people talk about joy, right? What is really joy? So if you take it all the way to the end, it comes out that joy and sadness, the real joy and the real sadness, essential joy, essential sadness, both come from the same place. The greatest joy a person can have is really the joy that they accomplished something in this world. The greatest sadness a person can have is that they wasted their lives. All these, stories, a little cliche, but you hear about it. I wish I'd spent more time. But it comes down to the same thing, which is I didn't do what I was supposed to do. So when you take it to that point, it's not what we have in our lives or what happens to us. It's what we did, what we accomplished. It's joy of the soul. So what does that look like? Again, it's the same thing, bigger. It's the recognition that whatever's in front of us is really a job. It's like, this is material. It could be, like by me with the toll or the loss of my son. It's two very, very, very opposite ends of the spectrum. It's small stuff and big stuff. Hashem gives us material all day, every day. There's always something we got to do. And the question is, what eyes am I looking at it? What will give me joy? When you talk about joy, we a lot of times confuse it with pleasure or distraction. But real joy and real sadness are really about, I was put here in this world. I was given a certain amount of time. I was given material. None of it by mistake. The people I was born to, the kind of personality I have, the stuff that happens to me, all of it is material to be used to build something. And what does that something look like? It's the spiritual work that we do. And that's the joy. It's not easily won, not at all. It's really a constant. But again, it's about what is the whole reason? I mean, why are we here?
This is the gift that the Rebbe gave all of us to remind us or to teach us that we all have a soul, and our soul has a mission to accomplish, and only we can accomplish that mission. And when we tune into that, when we recognize that this is very precious times and moments when we are acting on that mission and accomplishing what our soul was sent here for, we experience what you're describing as joy. And when, God forbid, we're wasting a moment, since we are tuned into the fact that our soul has a mission and we've got this very limited time to accomplish that mission, we feel that loss, that suffering, etc. So I think by you bringing this to our attention, that true joy is a soul joy, there's nothing greater than that. I think that you've really defined the path to joy, which is finding our mission and accomplishing what our soul was sent here to do.
The mission's kind of easy because it's everything that happens to us. People are very afraid now. I'm hearing it a lot more now. What's going to happen to us? Are we going to have enough money? Is America going to go? There's all kinds of fear. And Israel and this and that doesn't mean there's no shortage of, the whole list of things that everybody's afraid of. And it's true. And we have to deal with what's in our, and even in their own lives, a lot of families in their own lives dealing with stuff. And again, we always go back to the same thing. What is this situation calling on me for? Meaning, what do I need to do? Do I need to pray more? Do I need to be kinder to other people? Do I need to be more careful how I use my own time? Do I need to be more careful what I read, what I expose myself to? So this work of bitachon, it's a work of joy and of certainty, but it comes with really everything that happens. It's a constant. It's not that we sit ourselves down at a class and have this spiritual, moment of like transcendence. It's in the little things. And that's where you say, what is the work of bitachon? I'm doing it constantly with myself, fighting, not necessarily always winning. but telling myself, yes, the doctor might be saying this, or the government might be saying this, or this is going on. What is the work for me? What does that require for me? So it might require me to trust and remind myself that Hashem is the ultimate provider. It might remind me that I should pull myself out of my own little self-absorption and see if there's somebody else who might need a little bit of a hand here. And that's really, it's always going back to the bigger picture, to the soul work. Yeah.
So really, you've told us that the mission isn't something that you are out seeking to find, but it's exactly where you are right now. Whatever you're facing today is your mission today. It's your mission for your life.
I think so. And if you can get there, and I work on it constantly, we save a lot of time, because a lot of people are always looking. How come you grew up in this and this environment, and you had this, so it's easy for you to talk, or you've got all these great children, or you're married and happily, or, we're always able to say, oh, easy for you. And when we can recognize this personality, this family I was born to, this situation, it's exactly what I need to do what I need. It makes it easier.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Devorie, thank you so much for joining the Gate of Trust podcast today. Thank you for your heart-to-heart conversation, sharing with our Gate of Trust podcast listeners how you've managed to strengthen your trust in God despite all the odds. And your words are profound, they're practical, they're inspiring, heart-wrenching, and moving. And we want to thank you again for sharing these stories of triumph against adversity, and blessings to you and yours. And may you only know true soul joy and trust, and celebrate in Yerushalayim immediately with Mashiach Tzidkenu Mamash.
Thank you. Amen.
Thank you so much. Matt, amazing. Devorie was just so inspirational. She was able to really share some of the deepest grief anyone can have. And she was really able to show how, with hard work, trust in Hashem, using a full toolkit, of which one of those tools is the book, Gate of Trust, you can really come back from true devastation, repeated devastation. She obviously had faith. She kept one child, another child, thinking things would work out. And then to have all of that, and then have her world turned upside down when she, like she said, she had her sick children and her healthy children, and then to lose a healthy child after all that. When you see her smiling as she's talking, it's hard to imagine that I know a lot of people would say, I don't know if I'd ever smile again, but to see her smiling and to see her joy and her acknowledgement of faith and effort, you see that she's created a real vessel in reality.
What's so inspiring to me about Devorie is that she, as you said, she experienced such grief, but she's been able to find a way to transform it for herself, to seek out the Gate of Trust and Bitachon as a way of bringing her to deal with that challenge, but also bring that to discover the highest level of joy, her soul joy, and her mission in this world. And now she is inspiring others and helping others through their grief.
And then obviously she's devoting her life and her efforts to traveling, and it's not easy to travel around and to give talks and to create this content that she's creating, where she's touching the lives of so many people. Again, we turn our tears into tears of joy. She's really creating joy out of her own tears and helping so many people, leveraging that in such a beautiful way.
I'm really looking forward to her new book, even if I'm not. And I'm sure we're all going to have a new level of understanding of Bitachon after reading that.
Yes. What a great speaker. And I'm excited to get feedback from our listeners in terms of what they thought. And hopefully they all listen and like it if they like it, and share it.
Felix, have a great day and find the simcha in your life.
Thank you. You too. The simcha.
Thank you for listening to the Gate of Trust podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a rating, and share the podcast with the people you love. To access today's show notes, ask Matt and Felix a question, or suggest a Gate of Trust story to be featured on the show, visit gateoftrust.org/podcast.
You think you got it under control, you're on a roll, living it up, living your dreams. But when it all goes bust at the seams, then you scream and cry to the one on high.